AI happens pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, it might just pass you by.
Hello, and welcome to The Reasoning Show. I'm your host, Brian Gracely, and today I have reason to believe that one of the original use cases for generative AI, which is customer service, is ripe for a lot of change, a lot of improvement, the ability to improve how we get our customer service, to deliver broader sets of customer service, and ultimately to hopefully make us a little bit happier. And we're going to dig into that with Shashi from Zendesk right after the break. Today's show is sponsored by ShareGate. You're out of time. Copilot needs to be deployed ASAP, but your tenant really isn't ready for it. Years of data, permissions, and users lurk in its shadows, ready to be exposed by AI. ShareGate Protect sees it all, so you can find the exposure risks, fix them fast, and deploy AI with confidence. Microsoft 365 governance, they've got this. Learn more at sharegate.com/protect. Today's show is sponsored by Nasuni. There's a growing gap in AI right now between what's possible in theory and what successfully works at scale inside an enterprise. The difference comes down to unstructured file data. Many AI initiatives struggle because the file data they depend on is scattered, unstructured, and disconnected from where and how work actually happens. Nasuni changes that. It brings your unstructured file data into a single, secure foundation so AI, both generative and agentic, can access it with the context, governance, and performance it needs in production. Bring AI to where your unstructured data lives. See what it takes to activate your data for AI and request a demo at nasuni.com/AI. And we're back, and I'm glad to be joined by Shashi Upadhyay, who is President of Product Engineering and AI at Zendesk. Shashi, welcome to the show. Great to have you on today.
Thank you for having me, Brian.
We're going to dive into a space that really has been both interacted with AI, but really been sort of a sweet spot for AI, which is your space around customer success, customer engagement. But before we really dive into that, tell us a bit about your background. Tell us a bit about what you really focus on these days at Zendesk.
Yeah, no, great. So first of all, thank you for having me here. Really excited to talk about what's happening with AI in the service space. My background is I'm a physicist by training. I have a PhD in physics, and then I decided to go into business many years ago. And I've been at Zendesk for about 18 months now, running all product and engineering. Prior to this, I was at Google in the ads product organization, running all the enterprise ad products there. Prior to that, I'd started a company called Lattice Engines, which focused on ML and AI for sales and marketing. It was acquired by Dun & Bradstreet and then taken public in 2019. So my background, really, the theme that ties it all together is I've been doing ML and AI applications for over 20 years now. And what brought me to Zendesk was this amazing opportunity we have to take this, iconic software as a service company and turn it into an AI company that's built on that's serving agents instead of just selling software.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. And I'm always surprised, I shouldn't be anymore. I'm always surprised at how many people in our industry started in physics. I think they learned a lot about systems and complex systems. And then at some point, I often find that they realized they didn't necessarily want to stay in physics. They wanted to be in the business world. But it sort of scratched that itch of both the math and the complexity of systems, but also brought you over to more the business side of things.
That is very true, by the way. Just to kind of one point on physics people. So Dario Amodei, of course, the Anthropic CEO is a physicist, but also the physics guys have recognized that there's been this big exodus of people to AI. So they gave the Nobel Prize last year for physics to a bunch of AI people. So it's kind of runs both ways.
Yeah, comes around. As I mentioned in sort of the opening, we were talking, I feel like a year and a half ago, maybe even 2 years ago, and we said right off the bat, there felt like two really obvious use cases that people were using generative AI for. One of them was obviously developer assistance and coding, and the other one was around variations on customer support. Really excited today to kind of dig into with you because Zendesk is right at the center of that world. You guys have been making some big moves from an AI perspective to evolve the company. You describe where we are today as sort of a shift from systems of records, very traditional systems of records, to intelligent systems of action. What are you seeing in the market that's sort of shifting it that makes AI sort of the perfect, antidote, solution for customer service and so forth? And then what was sort of fundamentally broken that's accelerated what you guys are doing in this space?
Yeah. So look, the software as a service industry, right, had a great run from like 2002 till 2022. Zendesk went private in 2022. And since then, there have been four big events that have happened that are completely changing the SaaS world in general, CRM in particular, and especially service. Because service, as you know, is text-based, right?
Yep.
I mean, most of service is text-based. Yes, you can have images, you can have videos, but for the most part, text-based. And the big changes were, number one, LLMs came out in late 2022. So ChatGPT came out,
right,
which made it possible to have a conversational thing that initially it was mostly around Q&A, answering questions, started doing searches. Then sometime in 24, the reasoning models started to come out. So now you had an agent that could actually do reasoning. So, once you can reason, that means you can have a multi-turn discussion and also use many different data sources to decide what is it that you actually want to do. And meanwhile, a bunch of protocols started to come out around MCP, which allows the agents to connect to other systems, including with API. So now they could also take action and include other agents in those action. And then the last really 4 months with code generation, integration has become a lot easier. Now that it's possible to basically, just write your connectors as you go, as opposed to doing a big integration project. And computer use, which allows one to essentially fake a user, meaning you no longer need an API. Agent can go in, operate a desktop just like a human agent would do. So all these changes, they are perfectly aligned with the way support works. So in support, we have multiple channels: messaging, text, voice, of course, video more and more. And like for field service, for example, that becomes more important. A lot of these, every single channel can take advantage of these advances. Mm-hmm. And now with reasoning in place, with omnichannel in place, with text generation in place, essentially software can do everything human beings can do. And so that's why AI agents have come into play. And I'm happy to talk a lot more about that. But that's the support has absolutely been one of the great use cases for AI.
Do you, as you talk to your customers about what success looks like for them, how do they tend to frame it? Do they frame it in terms of volume? Obviously, they're always overwhelmed with a lot of different requests for things. Do they frame it in terms of their customer success? Is it another metric that sort of leads towards sort of customer loyalty? Like how do they think about it today? And then are you seeing that sentiment change in terms of kind of what they expect from their systems and what they hope that the end goal of those systems are?
Yeah, look, I mean, the interesting thing is the real end goal, which is to have happy customers and loyal customers, has not changed, right? I mean, that's always the end goal. Everything else we do is upstream from that. So you work back from what is it that like makes a customer happy and makes them loyal. A service experience is a very big part of it, right? You can sell them any product you want. You can have the best sales experience you want. But it's what you do after that really defines the type of loyalty they feel towards you. Especially when, they're stuck in a flight in the middle of a snowstorm, an airport in the middle of a snowstorm, and they're trying to get their flight routed, or they've been locked out of their bank account, or their product's not working. All that stuff, like those are the real moments in which you have to get it right. The truth is, most service experiences are not that great, right? Like no one wakes up in the morning and says, hey, I'm really looking forward to like having to call, airline X to get my like refund for my flight, right? Like we all have a sense of dread before we get on a call or sending that email, knowing it's going to take too long. There are going to be too many turns. It's just going to be a painful experience. So our job as an industry and at Zendesk as a company is to change that. It's really to move that experience from a negative experience to a positive experience. And the reason AI has been such a powerful force in this, right, is first of all, AI can work 24/7, all holidays, right? So like there's no like service windows when you can get service and you can't get service. Number two, AI can learn everything about your business. So very often the quality of service you have depends on the person you ended up interacting with. But with AI, we can completely make it like everyone have a great service. And so this combination of, it's proven now that AI can do, at least 70%, in some cases 80 to 90% of the work that human agents were handling before. I think we have proven that in the last few years.
Yeah.
Now, the question is, how do they measure success, which was the original question. So it is two things. One, what's the automation rate? So what percent of the total number of requests that you're getting is AI able to handle? And those numbers are the 70 to 90% I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And the second is, when you increase that automation rate, you also want the customer satisfaction to go up, right? So
Sure.
It's still measuring the quality of the customer experience that was had. And what AI has been able to do with AI, what we have been able to do is show that you can improve both. You can increase both the automation rate to handle more tickets, and at the same time, make customers happier by up to 10 points. So CSAT scores that our customers have consistently gone up by up to 10 points when they turned on AI agents.
Yeah. Are you still in that context? And I'm thinking about this as somebody who's a frequent traveler. I get stuck in the summer times with thunderstorms and all sorts of things. Do service desks still think about things in terms of levels of escalation? The problem has gotten X level complex or the next level complex, or are those types of things gone away? Because you were always sort of like you pointed out, you were fearful if you called in on a weekend or if you called in after hours or on a holiday. Are those sort of dynamics that used to exist in service centers and that would be restrictive or that might not let the best agents always service the best things? Are those things gone away, or is AI really just sort of accelerated your ability to not have to think in those tiers anymore?
Yeah, look, I think what you're talking about is like historically service centers have had this notion of L1, L2, L3, L4.
Exactly.
Right? You start
Right.
with L1, then you go to L2, then you go to L3.
Right.
You eventually end up talking to like the person who really knows what they're doing, right?
Right.
And so we did this, we were like very curious about this question, which is how much of the work that ends up in a service center is really like high value work
Mm-hmm.
versus how much of it is, just stuff, right? Like sometimes the customer just wants to know something and they're clogging up the lines, right? Or clogging up the channels.
Right. Yeah.
It's just a volume thing. But the volume has to be addressed, right? Like it's not like
Sure.
you can just ignore it.
Right.
So we did an analysis of about 1 billion cases from across all our tickets from all across our customers, multiple industries. And what we found was that 70% of what ends up as a request is not that value added, meaning like a customer could have in principle like done a web search or just read the document and like solved it themselves. Only about 30% is like something where a human can actually add value. So our job, and I think this is the opportunity really for all our customers, right? All customers, all companies, is to take that first 70% and make sure that it's being handled by an AI agent. Because AI agents are really good at doing that stuff.
Yeah.
Only if an AI agent fails, then it's handed over to a human, and that the human user is now helped by a second AI agent. We call it a co-pilot, who's also like fully aware of like has all the context, all the information, all the policy docs, all the things. And so by the time it lands in front of a human, it's already the type of problem you were talking about, which is it's more something that an L2 or an L3 should have been handling. And so the experience that you end up having is you are not, first of all, you're not repeating yourself like over and over again.
Right.
You're not being quote deflected, right, to somebody else, which is a pretty standard, it's an unfortunate practice.
Sure.
It ends up being a much better experience because you know that you're talking to someone who's knowledgeable and they are able to give you the help. I mean, the end state for all of this really is that when you have a real problem, you can get a human in like live in real time, and they know enough to solve your problem. That's the goal. And then the way to get there is to have AI agents do all the other work.
Yeah, no, and that makes a ton of sense because it's like you said, so much of it is volume. It's important to the person, but it's not. But yeah, once you reach those corner cases or those high emotion cases, yeah, you don't want to repeat yourself. You want the person to know everything, or you even want the system itself to just know everything about you. So it makes a ton of sense. You talk about this idea of sort of self-improving systems and kind of the power of, again, learning from previous cases, learning from experience, learning from scenarios. Can you kind of walk me through conceptually what does that mean? Self-learning system. What does it mean for the customer? But more importantly, like what's going on behind the scenes for you guys to be able to help customers have their systems improve themselves and continue to get smarter and ultimately, deliver better outcomes?
Yeah, so one way to think about AI agents, right, is that they're like a form of labor. They're just like people, right? When people go to work, AI agents goes and does work. So just as with people, when you bring them into a call center for the first time, right, they're smart, they've graduated with a good degree, they're affable, they've passed certain tests, but they don't know a lot yet, right? And they don't know all the nuances of the business. And they're not they kind of need to get up that learning curve until they become really, really good at it. So our inspiration for like a self-learning, self-improving AI, which we kind of encapsulated in the learning loop, is to capture that notion. And we asked ourselves, how does an AI agent actually get better at its job, right? Once it's actually doing the job. And it turns out that there are several techniques one can use, but I'll start with like a very simple example, which is, we as Zendesk have a long history of tickets. Like we have if you've been with us for 5 years, we have seen every problem. Our systems have seen every single problem you've ever had, right? So the very first job of the AI agent is to learn all that stuff, right? Like, hey, when this problem happens, this is what you go do. They've seen enough of it. So they go from being like, a zero AI agent to knowing about that company's issues, right? Like out of the box AI agent from Zendesk to getting better because they know every single issue that company has, and then building the process and workflow around it. So we call that auto flow. Like that's the way it goes. It just reads a bunch of tickets. Then understands, okay, given these kinds of problems, this is what you do. And then when the customer comes in, they have an issue, they're able to triage saying, okay, this is the kind of problem that we're dealing with. Let's drive them. That's the simplest version. The next sort of step on top of that is, as these interactions happen, our customers give us feedback, right? They're giving us a thumbs up, thumbs down. They're giving us a CSAT score. So that itself, the fact that now you've done something and you're getting a real-time feedback from the customer, did you not solve their problem, becomes a signal. So there's a technique in AI called reinforcement learning with human feedback. Turns out in support, you can create reinforcement learning with human feedback like really naturally, organically, because you're getting this continuous feedback.
Right.
So that's method number 2. But the one that like I think has the most promise, we think has the most promise is, very often, as you know, in enterprise systems, the challenge is the data, right? So it's like you can have the best AI agent, but it doesn't have enough information to actually get the job done. So when it fails, when it's not able to solve a ticket, for example, right? It triages back to, hey, why was I not able to solve the ticket? And it turns out the reason I was not able to solve this ticket is because I got confused between 2 documents where like one document said the return policy or cancellation policy for airline is X, and the another document had something different specific to that region. Yeah. So now it can highlight to a human saying, hey, dude, like I got confused here. Help me resolve this conflict. And that then you can go fix the policy documents. It starts to actually make everything around it better because it keeps pointing to the problems that it's running into. That's like, it's really those 3 things coming together that build a self-learning, self-improving system with AI agent at the center of it.
Yeah, no, I mean it makes a ton of sense, and I'm curious, for companies that have run call centers, service centers for a long time. They've had people in the loop. They've cultivated those people. Like what? Obviously, they're trying to figure out, as you talked about, how much can I automate? How much can I, put humans in the most valuable place of it? How have you found that psychologically, once you start thinking about people, whether you're augmenting people or you're using less people, like what sometimes is the mindset that they have or that they go through in order to, also then justify that or rationalize it within their business? Because I know talking from a lot of different people, again, in different roles and different stuff, there is always a little bit of tension of human, AI, who does what, where do you keep the right level of expertise? I'm curious in a space that typically has a lot of people doing that. Like, how do they think about it? Or how have you seen your customers thinking about that? Just kind of rationalizing where that should be or how to think about that.
Look, the unfortunate reality is that most companies today underserve their customers. So what I mean by that is even like what makes it to support is a small fraction of the problems that customers actually have.
Yeah.
We see this all the time. One of the things that doesn't get talked a lot about is, AI agents fill a lot of service gaps that existed before. And the best example of that, of course, is the 24/7 holiday nature of it, right? I mean, there's a service gap in the nights and evenings and holidays. It goes and fills that gap.
Right.
So, but we also have like other cases. We have customers that have free products that they didn't used to provide service for at all. There you have to pay for service separately, right? For example, that's not very uncommon, right? And now you can provide service to everybody, right? And then leave the high quality human service for the your highest value customers, for example, right? So we're seeing those modes of changes. And the last thing I'd say is no one enjoys. Remember, we talked about the 70% of the problems are just not. They just kind of grunt problems, right?
Right.
The customer. No one enjoys working on them. No one. Right. So the job of the people who are now working together with AI is actually getting better, and they're getting better at their jobs because AI will often discover data information, et cetera, that a human didn't was able to navigate or search through. So their job is getting better. And the last thing I'd say is there are absolutely new jobs being created that are going to look very different. So for example, if 70% of all tickets are being handled by an AI agent, right, then there's a job or jobs to monitor the AI agent itself, right? Architecting the service correctly. So we call it a service architect. So the notion is that, hey, it becomes more, the job sort of shifting away from interacting with customers every day to actually monitoring these AI agents that are having hundreds and thousands of conversations to make sure they are behaving correctly and interrupting them when needed, right? And making sure that it's handed to a human, for example. The people who are really good at customer service are often really good at those jobs, right? Because they understand, they have a good sense for what customers need. So we think that that's going to become much more common. And then the last thing I'd say is, I really do think that live support is going to make a comeback. I really, really believe in that, right? So we have done this at Zendesk ourselves. We now provide, voice-based support to our customers. We didn't used to a few years ago. But when you have so much of the work being done by AI, then it becomes possible for our highest, customers who are in the most need, our highest value customers, to now have a live conversation, get their problem solved then and there, as opposed to going through a long queue and a long wait to do that. So I'd say there's a lot of change here without a doubt. But I think the bigger change is the nature of the work, not that the work itself is going away.
Right. Yeah, no, and I very much appreciate the broader way that you looked at that in terms of, if you look at it, again, sometimes maybe how the media wants to look at it. But, if you look at it, like you said, as we kind of framed at the beginning, the goal of this is ultimately to make your customers happy, to sort of drive loyalty, but also just drive the experience they want. Yeah, it's, there are plenty of times when you call into one of those and you feel bad for the person that's working on Christmas or the person that's working at 2 a.m. I know my first job was working in one of the call centers, and there were plenty of days where you were like, gosh, I wish there was one call that would come in that would be interesting and new and different, as opposed to 25 of the exact same things that I wish I could just, send them a text and say, hey, type this command and you're going to fix it. So I appreciate you kind of painting a bigger picture that ultimately comes back to that, that original goal, which is, we're trying to make customers happy or resolve a problem they have. And the broader you can do that, the more happy they're going to be. They can get back to their life and do what they want to do. You touched on voice. Voice is a challenging thing, whether it was because of regionality of where call centers were, or just quality of the voice connection. All sorts of things can change that. How is voice which is such a medium. It's a valuable channel. How is that starting to come back to being maybe more popular or maybe more viable as AI comes into play?
I mean, voice is the most universal medium there is, right?
Right.
Everyone uses voice. You may not use WhatsApp, you may not use Signal, you may not use messaging, but everyone uses voice. I think the way voice is making a comeback has been a massive surprise to everyone. And the reason is that all said and done, that's the medium that all of us feel the most comfortable in. Voice needed some breakthroughs, right? So for example, the previous generation of voice tech was not very good at understanding operating with noise or handling interruptions. And so if you think about 5 things that need to happen for voice, right? You have to hear the speech correctly, understand what the speaker is trying to do, then reason with that.
Right.
Then based on the reasoning, take, either ask clarifying questions or take action. But ultimately you have to generate speech to talk back to them and talk back to them in a, respectful tone that brings the tension down and gets everyone to a happier place,
right?
And then do so in a regional way, right? So if I'm in, Singapore, I need to be able to speak in Singlish. And if I'm in, Germany, I need to be able to speak in German. All that is there's a lot of complexity in that.
Absolutely.
And progress that companies have made really in the last 2 years has been absolutely amazing. Most of these problems are now at a point where I would consider them solved. So companies like DeepGram, 11 Labs, OpenAI, and Anthropic is coming out with a model. And of course, Amazon, we have been working with, we at Zendesk have been working with all of them to provide our own voice solution. And with the acquisition we just did with Forethought, right, they have an amazing voice solution that's been put together, and there are a lot of customers on voice. We hear very, very positive things on how happy these customers are. And lastly, I don't know if you know about this, but we had done an acquisition of a call center application called Local Measure last year. So we're combining the voice AI solution, the Local Measure solution, Forethought, of course, and our own Zendesk AI agents in a single platform that can do omni-channel, meaning you can start with voice and then go to some of the more, or vice versa. You may start with messaging, but then say, hey, I really want to talk to someone here.
Right.
And now you go have a voice conversation. So voice is a big deal. I think it's going to keep getting better. And especially the ability to generate, synthetic voices that get the right tone and are respectful of the brand of your company, right? As a companies have brands have voices. Doing that has become so much easier now instead of trying to train, 5,000 people to talk the same way.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's exciting to hear. And again, for somebody who's a frequent traveler, I'm encouraged by all those things. Let's put on your crystal ball, your future-looking hat, looking at your crystal ball. Fast forward a couple of years. I know it feels nearly impossible, sort of at the pace that AI is moving these days. But where could you see the customer service space, kind of an ideal customer service experience 2 to 3 years from now, especially given what we've seen from AI, and then maybe what you guys are looking at around the corner for how this thing can improve?
Yeah, so look, we think it's going to go in 3 stages. So stage 1, we are already in the middle of, which is AI agents are going to take over almost all the grunt work, right? Almost all of that. So they're going to automate 70 to 90%, and they're going to do it across all channels. So independent of whether it's messaging, email, voice, WhatsApp, Line, it doesn't matter what the channel is, they're going to do 70 to 90% of that automation themselves. And that will actually mean that we will have live human support, that the capacity will be freed up. And so we expect that service levels will actually rise first, meaning we will have better customer experiences. CSATs are going to go up. Since no one ever calls a service center in a good mood, I think it's going to add to the overall happiness level of the world.
That's
right?
Great.
So I think that's phase 1. The second thing that's playing out as we speak. So earlier this year, for the first time, people figured out how to build AI agents for consumers. So this was OpenClaw, and now that's being instantiated with a bunch of releases that Anthropic has done over the last week or so. And then there are going to be more, right? I mean, there's going to be an OpenAI version, a Google version, etc. Sure. So now AI agents have gone from being an enterprise thing that Zendesk as customers provide to AI agents are also now consumers have AI agents. So what does that mean? What that means is that there's going to be a lot more bot-to-bot traffic,
Yeah.
right? Meaning this call that you're talking about that you have to make in the middle of the night, you wouldn't make it. You would just have your AI agent actually do it for you. And more of the service load is going to shift from agents, consumer agents actually handling it on behalf of who they represent, and then so it's going to end up being agent to agent. That world, by the way, means that a lot of things have to be rebuilt to be prepared to deal with agents rather than with humans, right? So that's number two. And then the third, the holy grail in all of this has always been that, at some level, every support ticket is like unnecessary, right? Meaning it shouldn't have happened in the first place. If everybody had done their job right, or everything had worked perfectly, you would not have an unhappy customer. Meaning you can go upstream and solve the problem before it happens, right? So for example, in your case, you should never have to call an airline and say, like, I need to rebook my flight. You should have received an alert saying, hey, I have three options, pick one, and we'll refund you. The refund amount is all in there. So it's all like proactive as opposed to reactive. And I think with AI agents, like so many AI agents and getting so much smarter, all of that really becomes possible. And that's, I think, the future. Like all of this, what's exciting about it is leads to happier customers, leads to more loyal customers, and leads to less drudgery on behalf of humanity at large. So that's really exciting.
No, it's very cool. And again, like I said, sort of, it feels like it comes very much full circle. This was one of my very first jobs. And so, to see so many things that we used to talk about and now knowing that the technology is sort of there at your fingertips, it's just a matter of putting it in place. A few things are going to get better. A few things are going to get better. It's an exciting time for a space that, like you said, people always start off being frustrated. If you guys can drive a level of happiness up, that would be a monumental task and a truly great service for a lot of people. Shashi, I'm going to cut us off there because I know that you are a busy man, and I know that we could cover a lot of different things. But thank you so much for, like I said, educating us about where this space that has been right at the heart of, kind of one of the core use cases for AI is today, but also where it's evolving really quickly. And I appreciate all the insights into, how you guys are thinking about it holistically and then implementing it as well. So any last thoughts about if folks are interested in engaging, where you guys are going with the evolution of your center, with voice, with some of the other things? Any best ways for folks to engage with your team that you want to?
I mean, check us out at Zendesk.com, and we have a great product blog. It's called Internal Note. Go read that. It's really good. It's got a lot of detail on what's happening right now and what's coming.
Okay.
And this is Brian. Thank you so much for a great call. I did not know, by the way, that you had worked at a call center earlier in your career. The thought that always crossed my mind is the person who's working in one of those places on a Christmas or a New Year's night, and you don't get people calling you to wish happy Christmas or something, right? It's like one upset person after another, and your job is to put them in the right mood. That's a really tough job. And I think we often forget in this conversation how difficult those jobs are. And I think our goal as industries really should be to make those jobs a lot more easier and more fun. Yeah, absolutely. Well, good. Well, Shashi, again, thank you so much, folks. I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you all for listening to the show. Thank you all for telling a friend as we've worked through this rebranding and are evolving, and feedback has been very, very good. So thank you all for listening. Thank you for telling a friend, and we will talk to you next week.
Check us out online at reasoning.show for all things reasoning. And leave a 5-star review wherever you listen to the show.